Hey everyone, this is Carrie Moody. Here's my community project for Kenosha, Wisconsin. So the community in which I live is Kenosha, Wisconsin. I went to the priest at my church and asked him what need he felt would be a good topic to talk about, and he said that it was grief. So that's what we did the project on. And then I worked on creating this whole discussion about the signs of grief and what complicated grief is and depression, resources to use within the community. My community is located in the upper Midwest state of Wisconsin. Kenosha is located at the most southeastern corner of the state, right on the border of Illinois, next to beautiful Lake Michigan. Our downtown area is always buzzing with lots of activity, especially during the summer. Many festivals and concerts, farmers markets on Saturdays, and live music. We have 5 public library branches, one of them being a mobile library from the Kenosha Public Library outreach van that will schedule services with those who request it. And there are 3 major hospitals located throughout the city, a community health center, and many health clinics are here. New businesses are building and growing in our community. Haribo is one of the latest additions in Kenosha, located in Pleasant Prairie, which is a suburb of Kenosha. It is said that they will intend to employ about 1,450 workers when the project is complete. And manufacturing is one type of industry here in Kenosha, but there are many more. There's construction, there's city and county, local government, healthcare, food and beverage stores, grocery, general merchandise, finance, insurance, plenty of restaurants, museums, there's hospitals, real estate, banks. That's just to name a few. So the city of Kenosha has a lot going on in it. It is a pretty big community. Um, there's about 20 gas stations, like I said before, 3 hospitals. There's about 10 large grocery stores, 3 department stores, 2 large hardware stores, dozens of chain restaurants, as well as a ton of local restaurants as well. So basically, you don't really need to go very far to find what you need. What led me to choose the church community is I wanted to give something back and be more involved in my church. So the need for information on grief within St. Anne's Catholic Church was what I talked to Father Bob about. And my project was created and implemented to address and discuss the topic of grief with the church members at St. Anne's Catholic Church. So community assessment data, the population in Kenosha is estimated at about 99,286 people, with about 3,529 people per square mile within the city of Kenosha. Kenosha has a majority of white population at 76.6%. Hispanic and Latino is at 17.9%, and Black or African American is at about 10.7%. And with the number of recent deaths in our community, there was a need for a discussion and a reminder about how no one should grieve alone. So there are resources available in many locations around this city. I found that Hospice Alliance offers grief support to anyone in need. It's part of a national Partners for Healthcare and Hospice Innovation, and anyone can request services. You don't have to have someone in hospice to obtain those services. And the Hospice Alliance in town here is close to St. Anne's. It's actually down the street from the church in Pleasant Prairie. Community partners and resources. A community-based partnership aims to have organizations work together with other organizations to provide a service to a population in need. The community-based partnerships that I've chosen for my project are with St. Anne's Catholic Church, where I will be delivering my presentation with the help of Father Bob and Todd Hall, who has worked with me to gain some insight on how people grieve, and with Pastor Charlie Hansen, who works with hospice, and Todd Hall also put me in touch with him. So that's how I found him. The resources for my project are St. Anne's Catholic Church for the use of their community room and to have the presentation, and the use of the equipment that they have there to deliver the presentation to the participants. Heal Grief was another resource. It's a website that talks about all aspects of grief. There's a lot of information there. My community nursing diagnosis is risk of maladaptive grieving among parishioners at St. Anne's Catholic Church related to the lack of knowledge of where to find services that support the grieving process, as evidenced by adjustment to loss. Grief brings feelings of numbness, shock, sadness, emptiness, anger, guilt, withdrawal, and lack of focus. There often is difficulty working and making decisions, difficulty in sleeping, and asking questions about faith and the purpose of life. This is very challenging to navigate, and sometimes it's hard for people to ask for help. My nursing diagnosis considers the need to discuss the grieving process and the effects productive counseling may have on one's grieving process. Whether that's individual, group, community, counseling can be the first grounding step towards hope. In my community health plan, I created a PowerPoint presentation to present to the parishioners of my church. In the PowerPoint, I speak about what grief is, what it's not, what complicated grief is, and when to seek help for depression. I also mention myths and facts about grief and triggers that can cause grief to pop up unexpectedly. Created a brochure to give to the parishioners in which to take home. This provided resources for help that's available within the community. And then I presented a PowerPoint to the parishioners, and we shared experiences and feelings about grief. The group had a short discussion on the types of grief and how they can affect people in different ways. And then to evaluate the success of the project, I provided a short survey at the end of the presentation to evaluate the success of it. So my goals, goal number 1, the parishioners will find the information presented on June 23rd, 2022 informative and verbalize their thoughts on taking steps to manage their grief within the next week. The first goal was met by presenting the PowerPoint to the church parishioners, which talked about different aspects of grief, what signs to be aware of, and when someone has complicated grief and when to get help. There are some resources provided in the PowerPoint and also on the brochure that was handed out. Then goal number 2, the parishioners needing help will take steps to contact a therapy group or a therapist within 14 days. The second goal for the parishioners to decide to move forward with contacting a therapist or enter into therapy of some kind within the next 2 weeks. The purpose of the presentation was to inform and suggest help available within the community. None of the evaluations that I gave to the participants, when they filled it out, they didn't state that they needed help with grief. However, everyone took one of the brochures that has the information on it that I presented in the PowerPoint. The interventions used were the PowerPoint presentation that was created, the brochure for the participants in which to take home, and the survey questions that were given to the participants to fill out after the presentation. Evaluation of the project. For goal number 1, the goal was evaluated by the discussion after the PowerPoint presentation. One of the participants had shared with me their own experience with the death of a loved one and expressed that they learned something new about the grieving process. And then with goal number 2, this was evaluated on the day of the presentation, June 23rd, with a survey that was filled out after the presentation. And there were 3 questions asked. The first question was, did you find the presentation informative? And the second was, how would you rate the presentation on a scale of 1 to 5? And then the third question was, do you know someone who needs help with grief? All the participants completed the survey and returned them to me. And in all, the participants agreed that this presentation was informative to them. There is a great need for mental health providers everywhere, including Kenosha, Wisconsin, but everywhere in the country. And by providing this information to the parishioners of St. Anne's Catholic Church, I hope that the resources that I've found on grief counseling will be helpful to them and to anybody else that they know that may be struggling with grief. In Appendix A, this is the PowerPoint presentation that I presented to the parishioners of St. Anne's Catholic Church. Here is Appendix B, which is the brochure that was handed out after the presentation to the parishioners.